Hi, welcome back to class. We're closing in on the end of the semester. Our next assignment covers a large segment. It's Matthew 17:24 and all of chapter 18. So Matthew 17:24 through 18:35. This is called the community discourse. This is the fourth of the five major discourses, in other words, blocks of teaching that Jesus does in Matthew's gospel. We saw the Sermon on the Mount, 5 to 7, the missionary discourse, which was 9:35 through chapter 10, the parable chapter, chapter 13. This is the community discourse, and the last one will be Matthew 24 and 25, where we have the eschatological discourse. So this is the fourth of the five major blocks of teaching in Matthew's gospel. Now, as we're getting close to the end of the semester, this is the opportunity to show off what you know in both this assignment and the final assignment on Matthew chapter 27:55 through chapter 20. Now, both of the last two assignments are both survey and interpretation. So I want you to be able to shine and show everything that you've learned. So that means for 17:24, you need to do a survey. And just to remind you, what is survey? Survey is names for paragraphs, 3 to 4 word names for paragraphs. Your main units with subunits. You can lay this out in a chart or as an outline. Your description of major structural relationships, and you're looking for 3 to 4 major structures in addition to any recurrences that you find. If you're having trouble with major versus minor structure, see the video on major versus minor structures. Again, for each major structure that you find, ask a set of questions that includes all 3 types of questions. Remember, you want to ask definitional, rational, and the implicational or the so what question. Definitional, rational, implicational. List a strategic area that best for each of the structures. The strategic area are the couple of verses that best represents each of the structures that you find. List out the literary form. Say a quick description using some adjectives to give a sense of the mood or atmosphere. And then you can include in other major impressions or miscellaneous things that you don't want to forget about from your survey. So that's the survey. Again, you're going to have to work quickly on the survey to save sufficient time to do the interpretation. Now, on the interpretation of Matthew 17:24 to 35, I've given you in the syllabus, and so you want to have your syllabus out, 3 different options for what you can work on. And essentially those 3 options function about, you can work on 17:24 to 28, 18:1 to 22, or 18:23 to 35. And look at the questions. If you work on Matthew 24, and actually that should be 24 to 27. My mistake there. If you work on Matthew chapter 17, verses 24 to 27, look at these things. What is the meaning of 17:24 to 27? What does its inclusion here imply regarding the situation affecting Matthew's church? And explore the relationship between 24 to 27 and the rest of chapter 18. So this is going to be a critical element here. You want to make sure that you're thinking about, why does that interesting story about Peter going fishing to pay his taxes, what does that have to do with what comes next in Matthew's gospel in chapter 18? Or you can look at the second piece here, 1 to verse 22, and list out there and study the main issues that are addressed and what the specific meaning and significance of each element within those first 22 verses of chapter 18 are. If you decide to work on the parable that concludes all this, interpret the parable of the unforgiving servant and relate it to the preceding material. Be precise, specific, and penetrating in your analysis. So, looking for you to shine. Show what you've learned. Show what you know how to do to answer the questions that our close reading arises out of a close reading of the text. And notice how I've broken this up. Now, again, your primary determinant is always going to be context. So I'm going to look for some substantive observations and inferences towards asking these questions. Now, you don't have to do the detailed observation for the whole thing, just for the parts that you're working on. So your immediate context is going to be whichever one of these three pieces you decide to work on. The segment then, and this is where you're going to want to think, how does the rest of the segment give me insights into the particular part that I'm working on, and then broader book as you're able to connect what we see here with other parts of Matthew and look for evidence in the rest of Matthew that can help you. Now, once you've done a good job with context, you're going to have a sense of some things that you're going to need to work on to make sense of this passage. Like, for example, some of the obvious things, if you work in this first section, you're going to want to know what the temple tax is. Matthew assumes his readers know what the temple tax is. So you're going to need to do some historical background. The same if you want to know how much debt was involved here in this particular parable, since it uses the old Roman coins. So that can be an invitation to do some historical background using a Bible dictionary. Again, make sure you use a modern one and be careful in your analysis of these things. You may find that you want to do some key words or look at some gospel parallels. If you don't know how to do the gospel parallels or a word study, look at the videos that I prepared to give you a sense of how to get started on that. And you're always, if you have time, it's always good to add additional things to your interpretation. So I encourage you can go back and skim through the book Inductive Bible Studies to see all the different determinants that you can use for meaning, or you can read about them in the worksheet that's in the resource section, suggestions for improving your work. Again, the last element that you bring into your interpretation will be the use of commentaries. Again, use at least 2 good modern commentaries. One of them is the France book, of course, that we have for class, but look at other ones as well, and then write up your summary. Again, this is a chance to shine. I'm looking forward to reading your work. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm Brian Russell, and I hope you have an absolutely fabulous day. Live by faith, be known by love, and be a voice of hope for others.